Chapter 8. A Strange Lead. The searchers warily circled the hunting lodge, but still came up with no sign of anyone, nor was there any sign of activity inside. Still cautious, however, Frank whispered, "Keep an eye on me, will ya, while I get close enough to look through the windows." Frank hurried forward, zigzagging so that he would be an elusive target. At last he reached the corner of the low, wide veranda that ran around the three sides of the building. Crossing to a large window, he looked into a handsomely furnished living room with a log burning in the fire. The room was unoccupied. Frank moved stealthily from window to window. There were several rooms in the lodge. All were well furnished. The bedroom and kitchen showed evidence of a hasty exit of several people. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink, and bureau drawers were left open. Frank signaled to the others, and they came forward. Moments later they were all inside the lodge, looking for clues to the vanished occupants. Joe, who was more interested in where the occupants had gone, went through the kitchen and out to the backyard. At the edge of the woods he discovered a spring, which flowed into a small creek. In the muddy earth around it were several footprints. "Hey, come here," he called. Amid, Frank, and Chet joined him. "Let's see where these tracks go. And look," cried Chet, pointing to several bright red splotches on the ground. "Looks like blood," Joe exclaimed. Dried blood would be dark," Frank said. "This is bright red." "This is a real clue," said Amid. "A user of Beltel nuts spits a bright red fluid." Their hopes raised at this latest discovery. The searchers dashed into the woods, following the footprints that Joe had discovered. When the trail ended, the boys spotted crushed leaves and broken twigs that marked the recent flight of several people. Red splotches made by the nut user were here and there. The foursome followed the trail to the edge of the rock-filled brook. There it was lost. Frank and Joe knelt at various points along the opposite bank, looking for signs to indicate where the group had come out, but they found nothing, and concluded that the fugitives had gone far downstream. Convinced that there was no way of picking up the trail beyond the stream, Frank suggested that they all return to the lodge and try to find some clues to the occupant's identity. In the rambling log structure, each of the four took one of the bedrooms. There were various fingerprints everywhere, but not one clear set. Suddenly, Amid called out, "Come here, boys. Look what I found." The others ran into the bedroom, which was furnished more luxuriously than the others. Amid was holding a dark brown object the size of a robin's egg. It looked like a salt shaker. It was delicately carved and had a number of black bands for decorations. The initials TN were engraved on the bottom. "What is it?" Frank asked, puzzled. "A sandalwood scent box," Amid replied slowly, and the initials could stand for Tarver Nivar, Frank cried. "This must have been where he was held prisoner," said Joe. Frank nodded and said, "I guess we'd better tell the others about Tarver." Completely astonished, Amid and Chet listened to the story of the kidnapped Indian and the hearty suspicion that he had been held here. "But where have they taken him?" Chet asked. "Wherever Tarver has been taken," Frank replied. "You can be sure the place won't be easy to find this time. His captors will see to that, and will make it dangerous for anyone trying to find him." "Then what's next?" Chet asked. "I guess we'd better follow up the pigeon angle for further clues," Frank replied, as all of them sat down to rest before starting back to the forest. "I haven't seen any signs of coops around here. I thought for a while that maybe pigeons were kept here, both as food and for the goshawk, and as carriers for the smugglers, but I guess that the pet goshawk was given other food." Chet sighed. "Let's go home. I'm hungry." He went into the kitchen and helped himself to a box of crackers and passed them around. Both Frank and Joe felt that the lodge and the ground should be guarded in case Tarver's kidnappers returned. As soon as they reached Chet's home, they would phone Mr. Hardy's operative, Sam Riley, to take this job. Riley and the boys worked closely together. He admired Frank and Joe's sleuthing abilities and encouraged them in every way he could. Feeling rested, Amid and the boys started back through the forest. Several hundred paces later, Frank spied a movement in the bushes and called a halt to his companions. Who's there?" Frank called out. No response. When he repeated the call, a boy about 12 years old stepped into the opening. "It's me, Glenn Morgan," the youngster said. Relieved, the three sleuths pushed forward to meet the boy, who lived near the Hardys. Joe asked him what he was doing in the woods. "Looking for tree toads," Glenn replied. Frank grinned. Chet grinned. "Find any?" "Sure, a whole pocketful," the boy said, laughing. "By the way," Frank put in, "did you see anyone else in these woods besides us today? Yes, a bunch of dark-skinned people. They looked sort of like your friend. Glenn bobbed his head towards the mead. Where? Glenn pointed to the southwesterly direction. They were in a big hurry, said one of the fellows, about the same age as you, Frank. Had a pet bird on his right wrist, and it had a funny cap put on its head. Were any of these people wearing foreign clothing? Joe inquired. No, they all had regular American suits. Did they have a leader? Glenn thought for a moment. Guess you'd call the lightest one the leader. He was tall and cruel-looking. He wore a cap like a ship's captain, and a dark blue coat. Bet he is a captain, because I heard one of the other men ask him, Cap, got the stones? Stones? Frank and Joe eyes flashed. Elated, they thanked Glenn for his information. The boys looked at them curiously. You working on a case? That's right, Joe winked at Frank. We've got a couple of toads ourselves, big ones. Glenn grinned. Hope you catch 'em. And good luck to you, said Frank. Once more the Hardys and Chet and Amede headed for the Mortons' farm. One thing I don't understand, said Chet. Why didn't Tarva escape yesterday, when he was evidently within sight of us? Chet asked. Joe suggested that perhaps the youth was not being held against his will. It could be, said Frank, that he has been given some phony story, believed it, and isn't even trying to get away. When they arrived at Chet's home, Frank telephoned Sam Riley. He related all that had happened in the woods and described the location of the hunting lodge. Mr. Hardy's operative assured him that he would start guarding the place at once. But I doubt those people will return, he said. Iowa insisted that the Hardys and Amede stay for lunch. We don't need a second invitation, said Joe, grinning. When the meal was over, the Hardys drove Amede home. They thanked the rug dealer for his help. He bowed politely and replied, It is you who are helping my friend, Harper, and my people. I should be forever grateful to you. Frank and Joe waved goodbye in their convertible and moved away. As Frank turned into the Hardys' driveway, Joe declared, Boy, I'm tired and hot. A shower's gonna feel good. That goes for me, too, Frank admitted. About the liveliest thing I'm going to do for the rest of the day is to make a list of pigeon farriers nearby and try to find out if one of them has lost any pigeon carriers recently. Before locking the garage, they stopped to talk to the falcon. She was bobbing back and forth on her perch, as though in welcome. Joe brushed his fingers against the bird's back and between the shoulders. We sure deserted you today, he remarked. After they had showered and put on clean clothes, Frank and Joe went to their father's study and started to check the classified telephone directory for the pet shops. The owners ought to know something about pigeon farriers, Joe declared. They made a series of telephone calls, which netted no information. There were only 4 listings left when Frank and Joe heard the noisy car coming down Elm Street. Sounds like Chet's jalopy, Joe said, getting up to look out the window. And it is, he added. Usually the stout boy nosed along his prized possession, as thought it was made of solid gold. But today he was evidently in a hurry. He slammed on the brakes and rushed into the house and up the stairs so fast that he was out of breath for several moments. Hey, Chet, someone chasing you? Joe asked. Without replying, Chet held up his hand and lay a capsule similar to the ones containing the rubies. Where did you get this? Frank asked quickly. Chet explained. Chet finally calmed down enough to speak. I was standing outside the barn when I heard a plane. At the same time I spotted the bird overhead. Suddenly the pigeon flew directly towards the craft and crashed into the windshield. Whoa, said Joe. That must have been the end of the poor bird. It was, Chet went on. It plunged right down to the middle of the field. And you found it? Frank queried. Chet nodded. The capsule was on the leg. Waited till you to see what's in it.